Hello fellow YouTubers, it's me Tom Versal here and welcome back to the Music Corner. It's been a while since I've used this channel, but that's because I've had nothing really to do on it, at least for me, other than review albums again, but I just haven't had the time or motivation. This year's been dreadful, and it's New Year, it's 31st December, can't do anything, but I hope you have the best New Year's that you can this year. And today I'm going to be ranking Tame Impala's albums. Now he only has 4 and an EP, but I've only heard the 4 albums that he's made, and I would say he's a great musician, a mastermind of the art of music. He plays a lot of instruments. Everything on these records really is him. I mean, sometimes he might have a friend to help him a little bit, but for the most part, it's one guy, Kevin Parker, I believe his name is, doing the guitar, the synthesizers, the drums, the bass, the vocals, and all the production, like the mixing, the engineering, just the recording itself. Of course, he does it all himself, and just to say what these albums are, even though some of them I can't really enjoy that much, I don't know why. When re-listening to these, I found them a bit more critical than I did initially, but yeah, I think they're all impressive albums, and if it's very different. Every album sounds different. So, without further ado, let's get into it. You all know who he is if you clicked on this video. So, coming in at number 4, we have the debut album, In a Speaker. Now, this album, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, this is great. This is 60s psychedelic music. I can hear John Lennon's vocals all over this. It's brilliant. But when I re-listened to it, I didn't really like it that much. I couldn't finish it the first time because I just got so bored. I rated this a 5 out of 10, I believe, because it is great. It's brilliant. All the instrumentation is great. It's incredibly impressive, because it's just one guy, as I said before, and he's done something brilliant with this album. But it's just a little bit bland and boring, and every song sounds pretty much the same. You've heard all of them once you've heard the first one. It goes on a bit long. The production, I'm not really a fan of how reverby it is. It's meant to be psychedelic, which I get, but there's so much reverb on it. It's weird, and I'm all for weirdness, but this one sounds just... It's not for me. It's not his best album, in my opinion. Some people might think that, but another thing I hated with this album was that it's got so much crunch and clipping, sort of. It's intentional. It's like MGMT do it every so often, where they'll make the instruments so distorted it just sounds like and you can hardly make out a melody. And it is cool, it is psychedelic and unique, but it's done so often in this album, and I just don't really like it done often. If it's done for a little section, fine, but on a lot of songs here, he has that. But still, I recommend this album if you're into 60s music. I think it's a very good tribute to 60s music, and it brings the psychedelic to a modern generation, which it can't be said for a lot of other artists. This one, even though it's not my favourite, I would still recommend it. Alright, coming in at number 3, his latest album, The Slow Rush. This one might shock you being this low, but I listened to it again today, and it's just not that good, you know. I mean, it's still good, it's still impressive, as I said, but it's very disco-y, it's very... not as psychedelic as any of his other albums. It's more of a pop album. It makes me cringe a little bit with the lyrics. All the songs here, I can never really tell what he's saying on these songs, so I don't really know the lyrics, but this one, he stripped back the reverb a lot, and you can tell what he's saying. And all the songs are about love, because he's got a relationship. I think he might have got married. He might have a kid. So it's all about love. It released on Valentine's Day this year. Red cover, obviously. It looks very loving, even though it's really weird and really it's unsettling, but it still looks loving. The slow rush, obviously, in reference to just love. Uh, but yeah, I just don't know. It's a bit of a cheesy album lyrically. The music on it is like sort of a mix of 70s dub disco with, I don't know. It's a very unique album, but it's just not that good in my opinion. It's so long. All his albums are like an hour long, and that's too much. I mean, I'm fine with an hour long album if the album goes by quick, but all the songs sound the same on these albums. So on all of them, even the ones that I like a lot, they still sound the same in a way. This one, it's just not for me. As I say, very disco-y, very danceable. If you put any of these songs in a club, like One More Year, Posthumous Forgiveness, On Track, if you put those in a disco or a club, like a nightclub, they would get you going. It sort of reminds me of Daft Punk in a way, this album, but with a lot more real instruments and not computer generated ones. But yeah, it was great. It's a great album for this year. You know, it was brilliant to have another Tame Impala album come out this bloody year. But looking back, it's not as good as I remembered it when I first heard it. So that's at number 3. Still better than In a Speaker though, and it's still good. I would say the album is a good album. I would just say it's not as good, you know. But anyway, up at number 2, this one was a really close tie between these, and both have their faults. But up at number 2, Lonerism. I got this for Christmas. I listened to it yesterday, so maybe I'm a bit hyped by how good I found it. But not yesterday, was it? Yes, it was yesterday. Yeah, I can't really tell with this year. Every day feels the same. This album is his sophomore album, the one after In a Speaker. You can kind of tell with the cover arts they're a bit similar. And it still has that 60s psychedelic vibe to it, you know, that the first album does. Still got a lot of distortion, still got a lot of reverb, and in those aspects I don't like it, but I think he's mastered the craft a lot better on this album. Just looking at the back, if that's his own studio, not only is it a tip, but I'm very jealous. Yeah, he produces all these at home, and it's just, he's a genius, honestly. Even though I've rated these albums pretty low, I would still call the man a genius. Like, he knows what he's doing very well. Yeah, this album is a lot more progressive, a lot more psychedelic than the first album, but in a sort of way that it sounds unique, it sounds really fun to listen to, where the first one's a bit of a drag. Even though this one is still an hour long, I didn't find it as painful to get through, if you get me. Like, it wasn't as bland and repetitive as the first one. Sure, the production can be a bit repetitive, but just listen to songs like Be Above It, Music to Walk Home By, feels like we only go backwards. Nothing that has happened so far has been anything we could control, which is a lot of this year. I just think this album is genius, and it's probably one that I would recommend to guitarists more, because it's very guitar centered, whereas my number 1 pick is very synth related. So you all know my number 1 pick, and I'm sure it would be everyone's number 1 pick, Currents. Tame Impala's 3rd album, his biggest album. Obviously, I'm not picking it as number 1 because it's the biggest. I think it genuinely is the best album. It's still too long, in my opinion. He could still cut some tracks out. But it's a lot more new wave, a lot more synth pop. Still very psychedelic. Imagine if you took the psychedelic 60s sound and combined it with the 80s synth pop sound, and you get something genius. And it still has that sort of disco-y bass lines that it would go on to continue with the slow rush. However, here it's much more, it's just more fun in my opinion, whereas that other one is a bit too cheesy. This one feels a bit more serious and on track. which is ironic because I'm pretty sure there's a thing on here called On Track. Yeah, there is. The artwork on this one is the best as well. I honestly love it. Looks very trippy, very neo-psychedelic. Yeah, if you've listened to Little Dark Age by MGMT and listened to Currents by Tame Impala, that is neo-psychedelic synth pop. Both of those albums are genius. This one here, some key tracks in my opinion are Let It Happen, Because I'm a Man I didn't really like, but I'm pointing it out because it was one that sounded a bit cheesy, sounded a bit like something off the Slow Rush. Sorry, my friend's Christmas present has just arrived late, and that's why I paused the video then. Yeah, but the biggest track on here for me, well, the best track, is either Let It Happen or Yes I'm Changing. I think Yes I'm Changing, every time it gets to that point of the album, you become in a trance. You've listened to a 7-minute song, and then 2 songs which are also good, Nangs and The Moment, they're both pretty good. But then Yes I'm Changing comes on, and it's more downbeat and more like you're on the edge of crying when you listen to that track, at least for me. Maybe not if you just listen to it in isolation, but if you're just sat on a road trip like I was, listening to this album, and it gets to Yes I'm Changing, God, it hits you, and it has every time I've heard it in conjunction with the rest of the album. But yes, this is his best album. I think the only issues with it, again, it's too long. I wouldn't give it a 10 out of 10 because it's too long. He could have cut some tracks out. Like, I forget which one it is, but there's one where he has, like, a deep voice. Like, he's edited it, pitch shift his voice to be deeper. And I just find that so... It's so cringe, man. And also, the production... Way too much reverb on the vocals for me. I get that's the point. I get that's how it's been with every album except the Slow Rush. That's sort of his thing, having very trippy trance-like vocals. And I know that's what he's going for, but just when you're listening to it, it's not really nice. It's just very odd and off-putting. It sort of overshadows the music itself because it reverbs out over the top of all the instruments, which themselves are also so reverby. They kind of blend together, especially here, where it's very synth-driven. This one doesn't have any crunch on it, neither does the Slow Rush, not that I remember anyway. That's just more with the guitar-driven albums, not these synth ones. But yeah, this is his best album. Currents. I think anyone would admit it. I bet Tame Impala himself would probably say this is his best work. He just probably wanted to change it up and tried new instruments, and hey, it was genius. So, thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Just going to recap over it. So, from worst to best, Inner Speaker, The Slow Rush, Lonerism, and, of course, Currents. So, let me know if you agreed with this list. Leave in the comments below your thoughts. I'm sure these albums all sound very different. In some ways, they're all similar, but they have their own unique twist on the formula that he's created. So, please leave in the comments below what your opinions are. Don't get mad at me. This is just my opinion. We all have opinions. And, yeah, Tame Impala, great artist. Thank you for watching. Happy New Year, and stay happy.